Today is Monday, October 24th. Welcome to the Subcommittee of Public Works. Today we have 3 items on the agenda that we're going to be discussing. The meeting will be structured as follows. Committee members will have the opportunity to speak first, followed by council members who joined us tonight. Let me start off by calling the committee members in attendance. We have Councillor Haas, Councillor McKenna, Councillor Novoselsky is absent, Councillor Powers, and I'd like to thank Councillor Guinasso and Councillor Batch for joining us this evening. So, City Council Clerk, if you would like to read off agenda item number 1.
Item number 1 of the Public Works Subcommittee, motion of Councillor Novoselsky that the mayor take immediate steps to privately contract out services to provide various signage for the City of Revere.
I ask that we take up this motion last until Councillor Novoselsky joins the meeting. So we're going to take up 16-246.
Petition of Mobilitie, LLC, to install backhaul transport equipment or small cell equipment on several pole locations throughout the city.
Is there someone here on behalf of Mobilitie, LLC to speak? Yes. If you can come to the podium and state your name and address, please.
Oh, there we go. Whoa, okay. Okay, Rosanna Ferranti, 19 Jane Road, Marblehead.
Can you tell us a little bit about the potential, what your plans are, what Mobilitie LLC's plans are?
Yes, so what I'd like to do is pass out a map that shows you kind of the overall picture first, so that maybe, because there's a mix of proposed locations, some of them are attachments, which I think are typically the least intrusive for a jurisdiction, and then some of them are poles. So I'd like to pass that out if I may. Yes, I just need to.
Which is going to take a few minutes while each member has an opportunity to look at this map, and then we'll continue. So, Mrs. Ferrante, there are 7 proposed locations.
Yes, correct.
So there are so there's going to be 2 small cell attached with new poles, right? And 4 attached with existing poles?
Correct, and then there's a transport pole, which is a little different animal than most people are accustomed to. So I'd like to leave that aside. I mean, I'll do that one last,
okay,
if
excellent.
we could. So I want to also pass this, if I could, just a couple of photos of actual installations of attachments that the company has done, so everyone has a sense of what we're doing. But so Mobilitie, as I've spoken to in the previous council meeting, is a backhaul infrastructure provider. So what does that mean? So we're basically trying to be the foundation for the data to travel to the networks and to the sites, the carrier sites. So Mobilitie is not a wireless carrier. They build sites. So our model is to go into the right-of-way. Now, as part of the right-of-way, sometimes we can attach to an Eversource pole, which is ideal, or we attach to city poles, which is also ideal because that, again, least intrusive. Now, if we attach to a city pole, then we would enter into an agreement with the city and pay a fee for that. So as part of the plan for Revere right now, we have, I believe we have 2 light poles that we're proposing to attach to. We have 1 utility pole, or 2 utility poles. So because of that, we would have to have a discussion with either I'm not sure if you have a licensing committee or franchise committee, but that would have to go down that road for that. So I guess I'm curious as to the sentiment about small cell and the need for it in your city. The reason why we're here is because there's a demand. The data demand is just out of control in terms of how much everybody's using all their devices. And so that's why companies like us are trying to pursue this.
So let me ask you, so this will help increase the service for cell phone providers?
It's
or
internet.
Digital,
Yeah, it's for data, it's not for voice.
just data, so it's not voice. Okay, you did mention that. You can continue.
Okay, so what I'd like to do, in some jurisdictions, what we've done is, if there's questions about a location, for instance, then we would, set up a time, have a couple people go out and have a site visit and say, all right, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? With the attachments, like I said, it's usually there's less discussion about it unless there's an issue, it's really an obvious issue. But otherwise, attachments are less. Now, the proposed new poles, that's where a lot of discussion takes place. I know that there's an issue with double poles in a lot of jurisdictions. And so the addition of more poles, it causes a little bit of consternation. So for the new poles, I would definitely recommend that would be more of a site visit approach to make sure that it's the right location for the city to put that there, and also if it's the right height. We are proposing 2 75-foot poles. If for some reason we went out there and we said, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, we need it to go down, then I can go back to the engineers and I can say, listen, this isn't gonna work. We need to come up with something that works for the city as well. So we're really trying to be collaborative. A lot of this is a starting point, and then with your feedback and what your goals are, we can work towards something mutually beneficial.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Councilors Keefe and Janino, who attended. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Any feedback? Councilor Hess?
Thank you, Councilor. On this here, like I see 75 feet, okay?
Yes.
Will that be 75 feet high?
Yes, that includes,
From ground level?
yes, correct.
That's high, okay.
And like I said, that's why going out there
Yeah.
and then having some input, local input on what makes sense is, I find, to be valuable.
And again, on the transport, 120 feet high?
Right, and that one's located, and you can imagine why they feel they need that infrastructure there. That's on Revere Beach Parkway in Winthrop. So the traffic and just the intensity of data usage there is forcing that type of size. Again, if it's not something that the city is open to, we can discuss.
No, this is for mobile, right?
Mobility, for data.
Right. Will other carriers be coming in now where we're looking at giving you the authority?
So our infrastructure has the ability to have a combined antenna that we could actually have maybe 2 carriers, but not 2 antennas. It's 1 antenna. I think I was passing around the way the installation looks. So it's a very discrete design. It's not like, you can't put a bunch of carriers on the pole or anything. It's not that type of purpose.
Thank you.
Council Powers?
Excuse me, do you have any illustrations of what the actual pole looks like?
I think I was passing.
Or I haven't, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
We didn't get it on our side. As Councilor Powers is overlooking at the map, I'm going to ask our Superintendent of Public Works, Mr. Goodwin, do you have any questions or feedback, any suggestions on this?
Go ahead. Actually, what they sent me is kind of small scale, Stephen, so I really haven't had, I think a site visit is warranted. This type of technology, obviously, everybody knows is the wave of the future, and it's needed, but at what cost to the residents of the city of Revere? I look on Broadway, we just put hundreds of thousands of dollars into the re-beautification of Broadway. We're gonna start sticking 75-foot wooden poles in the corner of Reservoir Ave. It may not work. The long-term issues with the poles is what we go through now with the telephone companies. I think there's not a short approach to this thing. Obviously, there's a need for it, and the demand is only going to get more. And I'm sure for us to provide services to our residents and even our businesses, and probably here at City Hall, we're going to require the same type of things for this type of technology coming down the street. So it's just a matter of placement, what it looks like, long-term issues with double poles, as she mentioned. That's a big problem for us. I know it's a big problem for many of you in the council. This is just one utility that's evolving into another utility, so we're going to get rid of the telephone company poles, and we're going to end up with these type of poles. So the same problems will arise, not now, but 15, 20 years from now, when they start to degrade, and what is the potential for them to add additional communication links or whatever to these type of issues. So obviously, underground utilities, above ground utilities, this all needs to be taken into consideration, but there is some concerns about some of the pole locations, and I think this young lady made a nice suggestion about going out and doing site visits to see if we can tweak them in some way. Because 75, that's 7.5 stories, and then right along Broadway with all the ornamental lighting and brand new sidewalks and all the work we've done, wooden poles on Broadway probably are not going to cut it.
Thank you for your input.
Excuse me,
Council
Mr.
Powers.
Chairman.
Council Powers.
Yeah, this illustration I have shows 7 poles. Would this be enough to cover exactly what you're looking to do in the city, or would there be more requests for more poles?
So right now, the range would be probably maybe a couple more over maybe the next couple months, but this is the majority of the polls right now. So I pushed the company because everybody's asking the same question. I want to know the plan. I don't want to be, shocked in 2 weeks I come in with 30 more. So that's a very reasonable question.
The illustration that I'm looking at, if I'm looking at it right, looks like metal poles. Are these metal poles you're talking about?
Well, it depends. So we can do a wooden pole. We can also do a metal pole. We can do something like if there was, for instance, if the street furniture on a particular area were all black design light poles, we could try to design it that way as well. We're trying to blend in with the cityscape rather than, we're not trying to be a sore thumb on that.
Well, that would be a major concern of mine, that, we're not putting in utility poles that are detracting from the work that we've already done, and we'll be doing more of next year. So those are my questions, and this will obviously be going to committee. Yeah, am I correct?
It's currently in committee. This is
in
committee.
Okay, all right.
And I think that because the sites are in a couple different groups. So we have the sites that are proposed on a utility pole, which the city doesn't own. So that would be more of a standard grant of location process, whether the design is, that's okay for us to do that. The next group would be the city light poles, and that is more of the agreement with the city to be able to go on the light poles, I'm assuming you own them. And then the third piece are new poles, which, like I said, those I think are much deeper discussion, and if at all. I mean, if we want to say, we don't want to do new poles, if that's the stance you want to take across the city, then we go out, and I can work with, again, a smaller group of people to figure out what we can do. But we really do want to bring this technology here, so we're trying to figure out the happy medium.
Well,
Council Keefe? Actually, you weren't here for the rules of the meeting. It's going to be structured committee members first. Councilor McKenna?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions. We have a pole that's 120 feet is really big. And we have one located at the VFW, the Beachmont VFW, right on the marsh. If you were talking about these 120-foot poles, I wouldn't be in favor of it, because it just, if you go down there and look at it, it's a menace to the area.
And I can take that back to the company and let them know that that is
So-
not acceptable.
And I know he wants to ask a question about, does the city get compensated? So I'm going to hand it over to Council Keith.
Council Keefe?
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen Mobilito. I appreciate the comments from Superintendent Goodwin, and, you know, I think that you had asked, does the council have a lot of, what's the temperature? And I think that you're trying to gauge that right now. So I appreciate that because, you know, I could sense that I don't think that there's a strong will to want to have these large poles across the city. But if there is a need, you know, to have the technology running through the city, and people need to have, you know, with all the mobile devices and wireless need out there, I know that there's probably something that has to come down the road. So I'm not sure if you'd be able to approach this on a case-by-case basis, whether it's, you know, one area or one spot in the city that, you know, there was maybe a test site or of some sort.
And so I was going to suggest that. So the other suggestion I've been making, because again, it's new for some jurisdictions and just trying to get a handle on it, right, is to say, all right, well, let's just do the least intrusive, a couple sites, and see how it is to work with us, right? And then test it out, and then see if you want to continue or not. You know, I mean, I know that's kind of a slow start, but I think that and it also allows you to establish a process or establish any other things you may not know of today through a couple sites. So that's why I think you're fortunate here in that you have a couple light poles and you have a couple utility poles. Some jurisdictions we've had to go in with all new poles, which is really difficult, right? Nobody wants a bunch of new poles. So here, I think you do have an opportunity to test the waters a bit with the least intrusive and then go from there.
Just want to welcome Councilor Rotundo. Thank you for joining us. Next, Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the need of the technology, but have you had this working in other cities right now?
We do. It's nationwide. So we have 88 sites that are already up on air that are functional, and we have 126 that have been installed, completed.
Because I tell you, I just looking at it, I notice you don't have any in my ward, Ward 6, which is West Revere and North Revere. But why is that? I mean, why?
I am not an engineer, so I'm not even going to pretend to
I
speak
was
about
just
the
curious.
technical demand of it.
Pete, I tell you right now, I wouldn't want one of these poles in front of my house, and
Charlie, I think if you look at what they're proposing here, most of these units are going to go on top of the existing utility
It looks
poles
like a
that we have.
transformer.
It looks like a cap. It's like a 3.5, 4-foot cap that goes on the top. And then they put the additional required devices, filters, conduit to bring the power up to them on the side of the poles. So most of these, if you look at the 45-foot poles, you'll see that they're going to go on existing poles that are already out there. It's these other poles that, you know, I have some very big concerns about Broadway and Reservoir Ave. And I think that this technology, you know, once you get these in here, I think they're going to be looking for more. You can see where they're located next to the Garfield School, our technology school down there. I'm sure there's going to be some use there, so maybe it's incumbent upon the city to negotiate a deal on our behalf for utilization of this technology, what we can benefit from this. That may go to somebody, you want to put it off to Ways and Means, or, you know, talk to the city solicitor about some contractual issues about allowing us to allow these to come into the city. There's a lot of ways to increase this technology, and the city can benefit at the same time, because it is the wave of the future. I've done a lot of studying on this. You know, they're utilized in all kinds of areas, not just on telephone poles. You go into all the big football centers and like Madison Square Garden, of periods of they're a very up and coming company, it seems. So this technology is warranted to a certain degree, but obviously when you start here in the city, we need to make sure all our bases are covered and that the city benefits from it, just not to give it out because it's a new technology. I think we can benefit from it. I think it can be done in a proper way. And I also think that with our new schools and the technology centers that are here, I think we can benefit from it if we negotiate the proper deal. I'm sure that's not her function, neither is it mine. But I think if they really want to be here in the City of Revere, I think that something can be worked out. And I think these test polls, obviously, Councilor Novoselsky's not here. 3 of them seem to be in his area. So, and Joanne McKenna, you have some in your area. So I think we need to listen to them, and we'll move forward from there. I'd like to know a little bit more about the company, but it is coming, and it's just a matter of time before, if it's not them, it'll be somebody else, and somebody else. Like I say, it's just one utility replacing another utility. This is the utility of the future.
Excellent. Thank you for those key points.
Steve?
Councilor
Yeah,
Belcher?
I just, have you, is it possible to do like the other carriers do, rent like rooftops and hotels or?
So the business model for mobility is to, if you notice, some of these are only 40 feet or 45 feet. They're not all very high. So the technology for wireless is coming down closer to the street. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard of a company called Big Belly with the trash receptacles that's got all like sensors and everything that, I mean, there's just all kinds of Internet of Things coming. And so this is just to support that connectivity, right? Everybody wants reliable service. They want to be able to use their data. So everything's coming down lower. Now, we do have some that are higher. So, I mean, I can't, again, not being an engineer, but as I said before, more than happy to work with you to figure out a way to make that make sense.
What is the closest city that you have up and is going now? Or you already installed your equipment?
So we don't have anything in New England yet, but we did just pull, we pulled a permit in Chelsea for an attachment. Again, a typical, utility pole, attach the antenna. So that's why I'm thinking that's a good start for everybody to kind of get acquainted and working with us and understanding mobility and what does that mean. But Providence would be the next city that we do have an agreement with. And
Well, like Donnie, like he said, it does. It looks like a National Grid transformer, actually.
It's very small.
So have you tried to negotiate with Verizon to put them on their poles? Or?
Sometimes we do go on their poles. So a couple of these are utility poles that are owned by Eversource or Verizon or both. So we do have master agreements with both companies. So then all we do is do a site license with them if the pole works. But there, can't have risers on it. There's a lot of requirements in order for us to be able to go on a pole. These particular poles we've walked and we've looked at and said these could work for us.
I'm just trying to picture like Donnie is on the corner of Reservoir Ave and Broadway. I just can't picture a pole like that being there.
But see, to me, that's so important because then I go back tomorrow and I say, this one, kick it back. Kick it back and go look at it. These maybe might be okay, I don't know, but these definitely not. And so that helps us not waste time, right? I mean, if you know something's not gonna work today.
And definitely you're gonna have a problem if you're gonna try to put one in front of somebody's house.
Agreed. So let's get it out of the system now.
Yeah.
And let's not waste, the
But
conversation.
otherwise, we need the technology. I hope you can work around it. We can,
That's
Here's the
all I'm
guy to-
asking for.
That's the guy to work with, though, right there.
No, well, that's what I'm just asking for the opportunity to be able to, like I said, maybe test the ones that are least intrusive and then go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Councilor Novoselsky. Just so you're up to date with what's going on, structure of the meeting is members speak first. You're one of the members. We held off the motion that you presented until the very last end of the meeting because you weren't here. Councilor Novoselsky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I honestly don't know that much about this. It seems like it's a new aspect of what's going on. And I personally wouldn't want to make a final decision tonight. I want to learn more about this through you, through, the superintendent, and through any of the other councilors. These aren't standard telephone poles that we're looking at, I believe.
Correct, well, there's a mix. Some of them are just attaching to existing infrastructure, and then there's some new poles.
Yeah. Because I know there's 3 or 4 in my neighborhood. So, I want to see what effect they would have.
Sure, absolutely.
I know people have thoughts, and we've had this in the past, about what kind of signals that they display, whether or not they interfere with any kind of other signals that someone may have in their household, a dish, TV, or something like that. So, we want, like I said, I'm not prepared to make a final decision tonight. It's an informational series right now.
Totally fine.
And, that's the way I want to leave it right now, but we can talk later or offline or meet
Sure, and if
somewhere
you
in
want,
the neighborhood.
well, I was going to say, if you want to invite some of your constituents too, we can have coffee and we can talk about it, and just so everyone's educated. I'm very big on making informed
Sharon.
decisions, so whatever you need me to provide, I'm willing to offer that to you.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Ferrara, I noticed there's no petition for Broadway and Herman. Also missing is Marshall and Pemberton Street from the map.
Yeah, so, right, and so I'm trying to figure out why. So what happens is sometimes the engineers pull sites back and so I need to figure out why that's not on there.
Okay.
It might have gone inactive, so.
Councillor Guanasso?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The obvious is that I'd be dead set against any additional poles being erected in the city. We've had the last few years, we've had some great progress within our community with the working in partnership with the Verizon and all the tenants that are located on those poles. And we're securing the efforts of removing a lot of double poles because they're so unsightly. To suggest a 75-foot or 120-foot pole in any community, anywhere, I think it's absurd. I think that it's 12 stories high and a 120-foot pole. That's humongous. And I think that if this project were, we have to also go forward with the new world of electronics and go in a positive road. But I think you have 4 sites that are located that could be presently occupied by current existing poles. So if in fact, Mr. Chairman, if this were ever to come to fruition, I would suggest that that would be our first way of approaching it, where there's an existing pole and an existing location. We try it with that. But to put poles in it, and namely, as the Director of Public Works has stated, on Broadway, we've worked painlessly to get and beautify our Broadway site, and to put poles in place now would really be a detriment to the progress of what we're trying to do. So I think in fairness to the advancement of electronics in the new electronic world, there are a lot of unknowns in this particular thing. Do these sites conflict with other cell sites
This is
we've
all
located?
FCC.
There's so much, but we don't know that, and we have to be told that and shown that, and prove to us that, the ability of all these locations that we presently have in place are not going to be deterred by this new site. My suggestion, Mr. Chairman, is very clear, that if we were to do this, again, I'm going to repeat that I think we should try it with the existing poles. So all we have to do is remove it if we find that it's not effective and not providing this additional effort that's required. And I need to know also, being a very unknown person to the electronic world, what benefits does this derive for our citizens? What additional benefit will they get? Will that mean that their computers will go faster? Does it mean their cell phones will be clearer? These are all unknowns that haven't been answered in anything that I've received. So I think this kind of knowledge given to us would give us at least an understanding of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And then once we make a decision based on that, we understand that, yeah, this is a good thing for our community, let's try it. And no, it isn't a good thing for our community, let's not try it. So it gives us the ability to make a determination.
Sure, no, I understand. So if it is the position of the council or the committee that no new polls, that is not something that you're interested in entertaining, I can go back to the company.
That would, I'm only can speak
Tomorrow
for
and tell them
myself.
that, and then
I
we'll-
would never want a new poll.
And then that way, we
added.
don't have to spend time discussing something that isn't
Right.
realistic, right?
Right.
That's my opinion, but.
So right now, my mind frame, I'm thinking
Thank you,
of,
Mr.
I want to
Chairman.
hear from Councillor Haas and then followed by Councillor Rotundo. But right now, I believe, I think we should keep it in committee and request advice and recommendations from site plan and review. But with that said, Councillor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said before, I think the height is much too great. Why didn't you try to utilize hotels in Revere or condos in Revere? It's got to be down the ground level? Okay, that's the
And-
reason.
Yeah, and the benefit too, as cities become more more advanced in technology, right? And have more services that are dependent on internet and dependent on connectivity, these types of sites are going to be critical to keep that reliability of the service going. So it's an evolution. And so we're just at the beginning of it.
This is a new company. You're going to be selling your services to the major companies, correct?
Correct, yes. We have relationships with all the carriers.
You do. Where are you operating presently in Revere, in the general area?
Out in Los Angeles, in Atlanta, and we have a couple sites in Chicago. So I
Okay.
mean, when I say nationwide, I mean coast to
Right,
coast.
right. This
This Northeast has just been on the latter end, but it's all over the country.
I agree with my colleagues, it's much too high, okay, the poles, and I would not want to see Broadway broken up with more poles, you
Okay.
know, so let's keep it in committee and see what we can do.
Councillor Rotundo?
Thank you. I came a little bit late, so I apologize. I don't know your name, ma'am.
Ms. Ferranti.
Ms. Ferranti?
Ferranti with an F.
Ferranti, my pleasure to meet you. So Mobilite is a technology company that deals with technology infrastructure. Is that about right?
Correct, yes.
And so what bandwidths do you operate within?
It's the backhaul, so we're not a wireless carrier. We don't own spectrum. So
You
we
don't?
no, we do not.
So what is it that you actually own?
We own the infrastructure and the antenna piece of it, and then we partner with carriers like Sprint or T-Mobile and such, and then they use their spectrum, but we do not use spectrum.
So basically, you're providing infrastructure to piggyback their repeaters
Their
and things.
backhaul, right,
Yeah.
their backhaul for data transmission.
So let's say, for example, we were to allow you to do that within the city. You have an agreement with these companies. Would there be an ability through the city and perhaps your legal to actually provide free wireless within certain areas of the city? So, for example, if you were to do it down on Ocean Avenue, down by the beach, or for that matter, down on Broadway, would you, if we were willing to allow that, would you, on our behalf,
We could have the discussion, bring it to again, I mean, this tonight really is to try to get a
'Cause
sense of what direction we need to evolve.
I
and
know in
then-
Europe, in particular, that's how they do it. The carriers hop on to other vendors, and basically they provide wireless service in lieu of either advertisement or, free freight on poles and so forth, so.
If there are particular areas in the city that are particularly challenged for service or for technology, let's talk about it. Let's bring it to the table and see what, I'll escalate it all the way up to the CEO if we need to.
Yeah, I think that would be something to look into as far as our conclusion. So part of it is to attract tourism on Revere Beach. Having wireless down there is something that would be very useful. Then on Shirley Avenue, which is a very bustling economic area of the city, as well as the downtown area. So obviously, it's going to be kept in committee. I'm sure we could probably speak to somebody in our community development office and look into that and hopefully come to some type of an understanding.
And just for sake of, I do have I can forward to the city solicitor a draft agreement that we've used as a starting point with jurisdictions to discuss any kind of agreement for the light poles or anything that we do in the city as well. Yes.
Yeah, that would be great. So we're going to keep this in committee and request advice from the site plan review. Once we get that back, we'll go over it, and you'll
Okay.
get a message from the city clerk.
Okay, and if there's any additional questions, I'll leave some business cards. Feel free to contact me. If you want to have a community meeting, I will come out, whatever you need. I think it's important that we all are informed and educated on it.
Thank you. Thank you for taking
Okay.
the time to present that before us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to take up motion 16086 by Councilor Novoselsky. This is how it's going to be structured. Since Councilor Novoselsky is the maker of the motion, he's going to have 2 minutes to speak on it. Each member will have 1 minute to speak on it. So start collecting your thoughts, feedback, suggestions, because you're only going to have 1 minute, and I'm keeping you to that time. Thank you. Councilor Novoselsky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I put this motion in beginning of this year, and it's just something that has been bothering me, and it's not against anybody's particular individual work. I want everybody to realize that we are understaffed at the Public Works Department, and our person, the employee that handles the signs, is a multi-purpose person, and he does a lot of work in the city yard other than doing signs. And with the short staff, I know the superintendent's here to talk about it, which I'm glad. I know with our short staffing that we have, it's impossible for one person to handle all the signs, not just for me, but for everybody, all our councilors here, to be putting up signs, worn-out signs, new signs that we're looking for, and specialty signs that we're looking for. And it's just impossible for one guy to do it. So I'm doing this to ask that we request the mayor to contract it out, whether it be for a period of time until we can get enough staff in the public works to be able to maintain it in-house. That's something we can talk about. But I know we have money in the budget, not specifically for the contract, but we've put in the money in the contract for the enterprise fund to hire seven new guys. Now, it's very easy for us to transfer monies out to cover a contract for signage. Now, I'm frustrated, to say the least, knowing that all the signs, and I would say there's thousands of signs in this city that are worn out. We have hundreds of signs that need to be put up, new, and it's just having to wait and beg for signage.
Councilor, your time's up. I
you.
apologize.
It's terrible, so I'm
Mr.
asking that
Goodwin, I'm
everybody
going
look
to have
at this.
each member speak for 1 minute, and then you'll be able to give your feedback toward the end.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Haas, would you like to say anything for 1 minute?
Basically, I know there's a problem with the ward councils requesting signage and they're not being completed. But I don't know the intricacies of what's going on down DPW. You want to explain, Don?
Yeah, well, I think Ira hit it right on the head. You know, first and foremost, we're understaffed. I mean, that's the obvious person. Now, I heard him mention the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund can only be used for water and sewer purposes. It cannot be used for DPW general projects whatsoever. The mayor and I have talked about this. We're talking about restructuring down there, as you know, presently, so hopefully that'll free up a couple more jobs in the next couple of weeks. This is also a violation of the Pacheco Act under the labor laws. Just because you can't afford to staff that department properly does not mean you can just go out and privatize it, because it'll cost you money to privatize, and you also have to prove that it's a savings to the taxpayers of the city in order to privatize and outsource a union position without first negotiating, going through the thing. Now, getting back to what Ira says, I think that maybe the union would be open to negotiation if we sat down and we said, okay, listen, we have 1,000 stop signs that need to be replaced. We need this that needs to be replaced. They would say, okay, on a one-time basis, they would agree that we hire a contractor. We did this in the past when we went over to the new street sweeping policies, that we had to sign the entire city. Obviously, one-man staff can't possibly undertake that type of project. So we sat down, we negotiated with the union, they agreed, and we moved forward with that. So there is a way to get it done if somebody wants to go out and do the survey of what we actually need to do and put a program together.
Mr. Goodwin, I'm going to ask if you can hold those thoughts until you make your statement at the end.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Marabito. I just want to say that for me, as a Ward 1 councillor, it's very frustrating because you put in these motions for signage and they don't get done, and then people come up to you and say that you're not doing your job. And the motion's in, but the signage is not up. For 1 year, I've been trying to get permit parking down in Beachmont, and it's one road was done, and then two streets were not even on my motion got done. And the streets that I put in for motions haven't been done. And so all these people are coming to me and saying, what happened to the motion? What happened to my permit parking? So it's making me look bad that these motions, and my ward, and my fellow ward councilors too, that, and councilors at large, it's making us look bad that we're not doing our job, and we are doing our job. I'm giving 100%, and people are saying to me that I'm not doing my job. It hurts me because, I'm doing a great job, I think. I'm answering everybody's calls, I'm trying to do the right thing, but then when people come to me and say I'm not doing my job, it just really, it frustrates me.
Thank you, Councilor
you.
McKenna. Exactly on the minute. Next, Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel very strongly that the staff down there has to be beefed up. I think that's the answer. Mr. Adriani does a great job down there, but he's in too many different areas, trying to get too many different things done. I think specifically he should be doing signs, and if he needs an additional person with him to do the signs, which I'm sure would move it along and expedite it a lot further, that's the way we have to go. And I would say the same thing applies to potholes. I've got people that have put in requests for potholes 6 weeks ago. I met a lady the other night, put in a request April 30th, and it's still not done. So I think that the answer is getting people that can do the work down there and getting them moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for going under time, Councilor Powers. I think that's a first. We have Councilor Janino who's going to speak, followed by Councilor Rotundo. Councilor Guinasso will be the third to speak. And let's keep our comments to 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a great motion, and I think it's something that we definitely need to look into, but I understand that I would ideally like the city to be able to handle it on our own, but as we've known for many years, DPW is incredibly understaffed, so if you don't have the supplies and the equipment and the manpower to do this, we don't. So I think that the more important issue here, aside from privatizing it, is figuring out how can we fix our own problem within, and what can we give the DPW, what resources do they need from us so that they can do their job to the fullest so that we can then do our job. So I think that's the bigger picture issue that we need to look at here. So I hope that we can, and I know it's frustrating because I can't tell you how many, street signs are faded or falling off or broken or stolen or who knows what happens to them, but it's a citywide issue and something that I hope we can address. But I think the bigger core issue here is that we need to figure out how we can support our DPW and give them the supplies they need to do their job. Thank you.
Good point, Councilor Janino. Councilor Rotundo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I disagree. I don't believe that we should be subbing this out whatsoever. More importantly, you have to deal with contractual issues with the union. I highly doubt that you'll be able to overcome them. I think the better solution would be to hire temporary help in order to facilitate that issue. In the end, you don't take away the issue of collective bargaining, and you don't get into that turmoil, which would be quite lengthy.
That was quick. Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Councilor McKenna. We do put the motions in to get signs that goes to the Traffic Commission. and they seem to get buried at the Traffic Commission. But I understand your problem down the, as far as being understaffed, and that we have to work to get better, because I am against privatizing. I don't want to see that happen. And also, we have to work to get that done, and also signs that are there that's been in place and are worn out, that people are getting tickets for sweeping, and you can't even read the signs. And people go in with pictures of the sign, and they still have to pay the ticket. It's just not fair to the residents of Revere. So I want to work, we want to work to get this, we should put this on a priority to get you some more help and maybe some more money, and to get these signs put up and replaced. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Patch. Council Guinasso, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the several calls, Mr. Superintendent, that we received from our constituents, it's really not acceptable anymore to give an answer that we are short of people power, we don't have the resources, we have the inability to perform the requests that you've asked of us. People don't want to hear that any longer. I had one individual who simply come in January or February, he said, please get me a sign. People walking their dogs in the grass that he takes care of, that's city-owned, and, not to use that site to relieve themselves, the dogs relieve themselves. And I asked for a sign. I brought a picture down of one that's in place in another location, and he's still waiting. But now the individual sees me, and I almost have to run away, because it's like, he's wondering, am I performing my duties that I was elected to do? And we just keep hitting a wall, because we don't have the people power. We have an individual who's overworked, he's not there, he's on vacation, he's out sick, and these are part of the cost of doing business. But we can't stop the business once one individual is unable to perform the duties. If he's not there, for whatever reason it might be, we have to come up with a solution. And I spoke to you privately before the meeting, and you told me some of the ramifications that you're held under, and I'm not faulting you for that. But I think we collectively, along with the administration, have to come up with a solution to better satisfy some of the requests of these councilors.
Councilor Guinasso, thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman.
I just want to thank all of you for keeping and cooperating with me and staying to that 1 minute rule. Johnny? Oh, actually, excuse me, Councilor Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be less than 1 minute. I am a ward councilor as well, and I feel Councilor Novoselsky's pain and the rest of the councilors, but it's not about my pain. I want these signs done just like anyone else, but I would absolutely never agree to privatizing it and going outside of our DPW, that we have capable people. Yes, Superintendent Goodwin, we have a very good relationship, and I think you do a tremendous job. I would look for you to holding your staff as accountable as you can, and I would be a proponent to get that full-time staff on, not temps, get 1 or 2 if we need to. I think the mayor should agree, and we should, as a council, should make him agree to getting the full-time staff on. So I was going to ask if you could tell us what's your staffing level and what does it need to be so that we can get the services done in the city that we need.
Our present staff.
And with that said, I also want to add, how would this be hurting your department?
Privatizing?
Not privatizing completely, but trial. I think we should do it temporarily.
First of all, Council, right away you're going to be in violation of the Pacheco Act, okay? You're going to have a complete, total meltdown. Morale is as bad as not. When you stand here and you say, I feel like I'm not doing my job, well, that knife cuts both ways, because you have one guy out there, and what do they hear out in the street? They're not doing their job, they're not doing their job. That guy works every single day. He's either putting up signs, laying hot top, helping the carpenters, doing something else. That guy is doing his job. He's doing his job as well or better than any of you sitting here, and he's getting criticized for it. That's not right, it's not proper. okay? We have an issue that we have to deal with collectively as a department and the government that we represent and the people that we represent. This issue has gone on for years. Ira has been, he's been with us. He's been, I'm going to try to get you guys, I'm going to try to get you guys, but, it's 17 years later, and we have less guys than we had before. The city is growing, the population's growing, we got 103 miles of streets, we got thousands and thousands of signs. The highway crew they're responsible for streets and sidewalks and potholes, and you got, 4 guys in a department. It's just not what it is that we need. Now, getting back to the current problem, can we sit down with the union and have a survey done and say, okay, let's survey which signs are worn out, which needs to be replaced, and we say, okay, we have 5,000 signs that need to be replaced immediately. Well, they would probably negotiate with you and sit down and make a deal that you would have we've done it in the past. You come in, we'll have a but it has to be negotiated. You can't come in here and tell them that this is what they're gonna do, because it's their job. And the reason why the condition is what it is because there isn't sufficient manpower to carry out the duties and responsibility of a sign shop in a community that has over 50,000 people. One guy. And that one guy also works in concert with the carpentry division, the highway division, and the sanitation division. So we have, in my yard, I have 17 guys that can go out in the street and do all these, 31 in total. You got 10 here, other guys that are in the street. 17 people out in the street for a community this large. You said it, not me. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and you can't have these high expectations that this is all going to get done. Every single week we come in, I've been meeting with the mayor on a regular basis. How do we combat this? How do we get ahead of this? How do we move? We're having weekly meetings on this stuff, and we're moving in that direction. It's going to take some time, but this problem that I was talking about is not going to go away. Now, if we do take that approach and talk to the unions and talk to their president and their business agent and say, this is what we're thinking, and take that approach that when we negotiate with it, maybe they say, okay, we agree. But in the course of due time, we expect you to do your due diligence and bring on additional help in the future. It's a negotiated issue, and the residents in this community deserve it. They pay high taxes.
Thank you.
They demand services, and they should be demanding a service. And they're demanding them of you people sitting here. I sat there. I know what it's like, Stephen. But that knife cuts both ways.
I agree, but we have to come to a happy medium.
We do.
Deciding how.
And it's got to be a negotiated setup.
I'm going to have the maker of the motion. I'm giving the maker of the motion an opportunity to rebuttal with what you said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have not criticized, and nobody here has criticized Ray. He's a dear friend, he's a good worker, and I agree with you there. He does what he has to do, when he has to do it. When you ask him to do something, he'll do it, he'll never say no to you. And I know that. But like I said, it's frustrating to me. But I think, and everybody else, okay? But I would also say that, yes, we don't want to break any laws, okay? But we do want to negotiate, and I think we ought to work on reaching out to the union, okay? And just let me interrupt for myself for a second, knowing that Ray is close to retirement. So now we won't even have him. Now we won't have anybody unless the mayor works on getting some people down there to do the job. And what I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, is that you have another meeting. We invite the mayor to come up here and still have him talk to, the superintendent about negotiating and do some kind of survey, whether we all want to work on it and reach out in our own neighborhoods to see what signs have to be done. I know there are emergency arteries for snow removal that people will not know are snow removal signs this winter and have to get towed. So I would say let's work.
Thank you.
Let's work,
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor.
just one second, please. Let's work on talking and negotiating and see what we can do to make this work.
I will start that first thing in the morning.
Okay,
I
I'm
will
going to end this
contact the local
conversation right
president
now.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. What we're going to do is we're going to keep this in the committee, and we're going to request for the mayor to be in attendance, superintendent, see how we can go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Council. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Next motion, please.
Item number 3, 16-271, Petition of National Grid to install an underground conduit on Belcher Street.
Is anyone here to speak from National Grid?
Good evening, Council.
If you can state your name, address.
Mike Cordima from National Grid at 170 Medford Street. The customer at this address we submitted proposes to build a house out there. So he wanted to take power off of one of our poles. It looks like a driveway, but it's listed as a street by you folks, so he wants to run conduit down there to the property and then build his house. But I know he also has to run gas, sewer, and water down there, so.
Is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak on this motion? No. Any of the councilors?
Joanne?
Anyone want to speak on this? Councilor Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have the address, and I don't want to stop progress from installing this conduit, but I've heard from a number of residents and/or business persons, specifically there's a property on Washington Ave, new Washington Ave condominiums. They still have not gotten electric turned on, and they've had numerous requests to the power company. So I don't understand why we'd be granting anything new if we have businesses that have been waiting 2-3 months to have their power turned on or brought in. So are we behind? Is there a big backlog at National Grid or something that we can get a little bit something moving here?
Well, what I can do is find out when my supervisor, he reviews it. It's called a design review. Then after that, it gets pushed along, and from there, Waltham would do billing, collect funds, and do all that stuff. If you like, I'll double-check 770 Washington Ave in the morning. Okay, I'll be there.
I have a question for him. An answer.
Councilor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, is this considered a paper street? This is not I don't believe it. I don't know if this is an accepted street or not. And I don't know the legality. I don't know if the clerk,
It's an unaccepted way of the City of Revere. It's not a paper street.
it's an unaccepted street.
It has not been accepted. It's not wide enough. Doesn't conform to Mass DOT.
Okay, and so we haven't accepted it.
It's
Is it
listed
paved?
it's listed as a public way of the City of Revere, but it has
Okay.
not been officially accepted by the City Council.
Is it a paved street? Is this way,
Like, it appears to be like a driveway,
but
Counselor.
is it paved?
I think it is,
Or is
yes.
it crushed stone?
I can't rightly remember the day I was there for a site visit. It's about a month and a half ago, but.
I know it's not my ward, but I want to make sure we do everything legally and it's
Councilor
proper,
Novoselsky?
so-
Sorry to interrupt you, but we're encroaching that time, the 6 o'clock mark, where the Revere City Council will start. I'm going to ask for a roll call by the members, and
Mr. Chairman.
let's do that now.
Mr. Chairman, I would not like to vote on this. I'd like to get the legality on whether or not we should do it. And I think we ought to go to either the city solicitor and the superintendent of public works to determine whether or not we can allow someone to go on an unaccepted street.
Feedback from the ward councilor?
I think it's a paper street. I believe it's a paper street, and I think one of the motions coming up is to have those paper streets paved, but I'm against this right now. I think we need to look at it further and review it, so I'm against it.
So let's vote this out favorably or unfavorably to the city council as a whole.
Mr. Chairman.
Why can't we table it?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor?
Mr. Chairman, I think an easement is in order to begin with. If we have to have the city has to have access to the property, we have to have an easement in place.
So then, why don't we keep this in committee and get city solicitor's opinion on it, okay? and city engineer as well.
Sir?
So we'll
Sir?
keep it in committee.
I know that this petition is for the customer to do the work. Because it's in the public way, we submit this petition request, but you might want to talk to these people here on my order.
Yeah, but you got to keep in mind, we can't have it be a liability to the city as well.
Okay,
So, with that said, we're going to leave it in committee.
okay,
Thank you for your time.
thanks.
And this concludes the meeting of Public Works.